Welcome back to another episode of Marketing Girly by Sky Society. Today I am chatting with Becca Bunch. She is the owner and CEO of Homemade Social. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you so much for having me, Natalie.
Thank you, Becca, for coming on. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics in this episode. We're going to talk through Becca's journey into freelance marketing, how she ended up starting her own brand and her own agency, Homemade Social, and just advice for kind of anyone who's really interested in starting in freelance marketing or growing and has a lot of unanswered questions because I know there's so many different ways to go about freelance. I feel like there's not really a guidebook exactly on how to do it right, or there's a lot of like different information. So I'm really excited to pick your brain on it, especially from someone who's had so much success as you have. But before we jump into your whole career journey and your advice, Becca, if you can share a little bit about who you are and what you do.
My name's Becca. I'm from Northern California. I'm 31 years old and I came out to Arizona to go to college, and I've lived here ever since. I studied marketing and journalism. I've always really been interested in the marketing side of things. But from like a non-career standpoint, I just got married in April. I'm a big dog lover. I have a 5-year-old cattle dog border collie mix who I adore. And I'm also really into like home decor. Like that's kind of how I unplug and I apply like the same aesthetics power I use for social media management. I hone that into like trying to make my house look cute when I'm not working.
I love what came first, your like passion for social design or your passion for home decor?
Honestly, I think it had to be social because I needed the money in order to decorate the house.
True. All of the like my dream Pinterest board home decor, it is sometimes a little bit expensive to make
I
that
know.
reality.
And I have like different Pinterest board eras, like the era I thought I would have a studio in New York, the era I was like, I'm gonna have a Victorian house in Maine. Like,
Oh my gosh. And how about so now do you and your husband have a house together?
yes, so we just bought a house in September, so like within the last year. So it's been really fun decorating it, and like all in the last year we got a house and got married and honeymoon. So now the real life starts.
Exciting. Okay, well, I'm super excited to dive into your journey. I'm curious now, so you have this passion for social, you have a ton of success with your agency right now. Um, Out of college, like when did you start to kind of realize that this was the area you wanted to get into? Kind of what was your intro or your start into doing social or into freelance?
Yeah, so that actually started for me while I was in college. It was unique timing in that I started college in 2011, and that was like the summer before college was the summer that like everyone my age started to join Instagram. So like that was when the first migration was happening with like college kids getting on Instagram. And so, my first role that really like showed me that I love doing social media management, I was actually just at first like the Instagram chair for my sorority. Like I was the second
No
person
way.
ever to have like the Instagram password. The handle is ASU_AXO. And I like was just I happened to be like voted that like I happened to like run for that position. I was nominated and got the role. The next year I got like promoted to VP of PR and marketing and like continued to manage the Instagram. And I was the first ever, I made our account the first ever sorority nationwide to hit 10,000 followers on Instagram, which at the time, like that was really big. And also that unlocked like the so many other features. Like now anyone can link a link in an Instagram story, but like back then, like those were really only reserved if you have 10K. So I like treated that role like it was my job, and it was my first taste of like marketing something online or on social media other than myself, and I loved it.
What? How did you grow it to 10K? Because that is
Oh my
hard to
gosh.
do.
I got really scrappy. So, in the best way, and this sounds arrogant, but like, I feel like my sororities chapter was one of the better chapters of that sorority across the nation. So, like, all the other chapters of our sorority kind of like looked to us. And so I kind of worked that to my advantage where I would like go and engage with any other member who followed another AXO Instagram account. It's called AKO, but I feel like if you don't know Greek life, like you won't get it. But I basically would go in and engage on like any hashtag that was associated with our sorority, with anything. And I got so many of those girls to follow our account because they just like loved what we were posting. I was basically sharing inspiration and like the events we were doing, the t-shirts we were wearing, everything. And then another thing I was doing was I was encouraging and teaching our members to post about our sorority and how to tag. And I would do a raffle at every chapter meeting to like, I would give a cupcake to like whoever won the raffle for who shared on Instagram the most that week and like
That
tag
is
the
so
sorority.
creative. Oh my gosh.
I was like 19 and I had so much fun doing it.
That is so that's such like you're so right in saying that is scrappy because that is such a scrappy way with like no budget to be able to say, okay, well, what
Yeah.
can I do?
Yeah.
And I also think that those are things that also may be like a little bit nerve-wracking. Like, can I really tell everybody to like be posting? But I love how you made it fun with like doing the little giveaway and making it so that they had fun
Right. I
doing
was
it.
like, I need to incentivize them somehow, and then like they'll get used to it.
Yes, I love that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you grew this channel to be like the first nation. That's honestly insane that you did that to 10K. Amazing. So what came next?
Okay, so then I had this on my resume, right? Like I was able to articulate this growth and these strategies on my resume, and I started applying for internships that were mostly specialized in social media. So I had a couple internships in college. Mostly all of them revolved around social media. I did do some like with emphasis in PR, some with emphasis in sales, but like I always really loved the social media roles. But then when I graduated, I felt like the pressure out of coming out of a large business school to like get a job at a Fortune 500 company and to go to the job fairs, and they don't tell you that like those aren't necessarily the best jobs to like get when you go to the job fair. And um basically I took a job at working at Target. And in my head, like I loved Target. I loved shopping at Target. I was like, what could go wrong? But my title was essentially like executive team lead of guest experience. And I wasn't doing anything related to marketing. So like I had all these
Mhm.
amazing internships. I had this great work experience on my resume with social media and marketing. And I think I just like felt the societal pressure to like take a job with a 401k at a big corporation where I could like work up, and I hated it. I was like so miserable. I was working 50 hours a week. I worked every other weekend. It really wasn't anything that I had like studied or practiced in college or any of my other internships. And I was quickly just like seeking other opportunities. And I ended up quitting before I was even there, like 90 days.
Oh my
Um,
gosh, you hated it
and
that much.
I hated it that much. And it felt like rock bottom. And I always like to mention this when I talk about this like career. It was almost like a spiral because I felt like basically if I went into any internship interview during college, like I was able to get the job. And then when I did get finally like the big girl job with the Fortune 500 company, I was miserable. So much so that I was like going to therapy because my hair was falling out. And I was just like I was so in my head about like, why am I not good at this? Like, am I supposed to not be good at this? Like, I couldn't figure out what was wrong. It was just, I wasn't the right person for the role. The role was not right for me. And so quit the job, but I didn't even have a job lined up. It was like a big risk. And I remember just feeling like so ashamed because I felt like you feel like everyone has eyes on you post grad, I think. Like, what is she going to do next? And I had, of course, posted my Instagram, like, so excited to have a job at Target. And I had even put the Target logo on my grad cap. Like, I put a big Target on my grad cap. So I
Oh
just
my
remember feeling like, oh my
gosh.
God, like a personal rebrand is necessary here. I was like, what did I do? But I scrambled. I got quickly within like a month, I think, I got a part-time job working at a social media agency. I was working like 10 or 20 hours a week. I did do like a little bit of like freelance photography, and so I was able to like keep a little bit of income. Like I did like senior photo shoots, like that sort of stuff. I feel like a lot of girls do that in college. And then I was able to get a part-time job at another company basically doing like copywriting and blog writing. And when they found out that I also had another part-time job as a social media manager, they asked if I'd like to be promoted to their social media manager. And within 8 months of like quitting Target and not having a job, I got promoted to the marketing director at that
Oh
other
my
job. I went
gosh.
from like part-time blog writer to full-time social media manager to full-time marketing director. It was just this crazy series of domino effects that like kind of showed me like, okay, this is where I'm meant to be. Like these are the roles I'm meant to have. Um, and I could keep going, but that gets us to maybe a good break point if we want to pause.
Yes. Okay, you're absolutely right. So much happens so quickly. I also love how you mentioned that you did want to share the fact that you had like you kind of you put the Target logo or the Target logo on your grad cap, like that was what you were set on, and then you quickly realized that wasn't for you. And I think there's also a lot of shame around like, your first job, you're supposed to be there for 2 years minimum, right? Like that's what
Yeah.
they say. Like you're supposed to like stick it out. It's not good to quit. It's
I
not good
just
to
felt like
leave.
a failure. Exactly. And like,
Yeah.
I didn't need to feel that way. So
Yeah.
I've done some internal work since then to
Good.
fix myself. But basically, long story short, I worked at that job for 2 years. And I think since I was so young, they were paying me just like a really, really low salary for what the role was. And I was picking up freelance gigs on the side just to like make ends meet and just like have extra money, to save.
Well, let
And then
me let me quickly ask you about that because
yeah,
I know sometimes people will be like, yeah, I started picking up freelance gigs on the side, but I think for those of us who aren't doing that, it's like how?
yes,
How does
yes.
that
Okay.
happen? So can you explain like, okay, so you kind of have this little bit of freelance experience. You're now working in social at an agency, you're getting even more experience. How did you start
Yes.
to turn that into getting your own clients on the side?
Okay, so back when I had left Target, when I was like scrambling to find jobs, I found that there was this website. I found a couple. There was like Upwork.com and like Freelancer.com. I think there was a third that's called like Guru.com. I don't even know if it exists like now. But I created like profiles on all of those and just started I basically added my resume and my portfolio to all of those. And when I got those part-time jobs, I ended up like focusing on those and I wasn't really going out and applying for like freelance gigs, but I was in their system. And so people could invite me to apply and people could reach out to me. And so I would say that's kind of how like the footing grew where I was like, oh, there's kind of a demand for this and like I could charge a monthly fee for this but I didn't even have an LLC yet. So,
Well, let me
um
another question. I'm gonna ask deep questions because I know this is
yeah,
just like an area that a lot
go for
of
it.
girls struggle in. So her having people reach out to you, they're like, we need some freelance work. What are you sending them? So they're like, we need this, this, and this. Do you make a portfolio or kind of what were you sending over?
Yes. I had a personal website that I think I had made through Wix and somehow I had already basically had that made. It was like a project I needed to complete my senior year in one of my classes. So I just like tweaked that to be a little less like schoolwork oriented and a little more like internship oriented, project oriented, and that had like categories of photography, copywriting, social media experience, like all that. And then I would link that in as like my portfolio examples too.
Okay, so you had the work samples there, you send it over to them, and then in terms of pricing yourself, I think that's also a really hard thing to do when you're just starting out. How did you think about pricing yourself?
Okay, I had no idea. And I just remember thinking like, how long would this take me? And again, I wasn't even an LLC. I wasn't really considering taxes. I think I requested maybe like $18 an hour or like maybe $20 an hour to start, which everyone knows that like if as a freelancer after taxes, you're losing out on like a large chunk of that. And you
Yeah.
also have your own expenses as a freelancer too, like aside from taxes. So I learned a little bit later on, but I remember like my first client who I probably worked with for a year, I was only managing their Pinterest and it was really minimal work, but I think I charged them $425 a month.
Okay, so that's was actually gonna be my second question, which was, do you recommend pricing yourself hourly or do you
Mm,
recommend being on retainer? Or I don't
great
know
question.
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
So my recommendation is if you're able to narrow down your deliverables, like what you are doing for this client to like, here's a list of what I do for you every month, always do a flat monthly fee because technically, if you do an hourly rate for the same amount of services that you're doing every month, you're going to be billing less and less for them because you're going to get faster and faster at it. So, like, you're going to be able to do what took you in the first month 20 hours. The next month, it might take you 17. The next month, it might take you 12 because you're getting to know the brand, you're getting to know the client preferences, and you're able to ultimately provide the client more value because you're getting better and better at understanding their audience, their voice, their messaging, but you're getting paid less. So my recommendation is like, if you're able to, always try and come up with like, here's what I'm responsible for delivering to you and charge a flat monthly fee.
Okay. I've heard that advice before, but I love the way you phrase it as in you're going to keep getting better at your work, so it's going to keep taking you less time.
Right. And your value becomes higher and you're ultimately getting.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm.
And the other thing I've heard is that when you are working hourly, that can also lead to you being like micromanaged maybe a bit more of like, what were you doing these hours? And you feeling like pressure to like
So
clock all
true.
your hours versus you just like getting the job done
Yeah.
that they want you to get done.
Yeah. Agreed. I would be careful with that too.
Okay, so you're getting your intro here. You're starting to get some freelance clients on the side. All right, let us know what happens next.
Okay. Then I get the idea to invest in taking a Facebook advertising course. So how to manage Facebook ads. Um, and the course is specifically geared towards like running a business's advertising account, obviously. And this course, I decided to invest my own money in it. And I think it was $900. And that was an insane amount of money to me at the time. I think my salary was 42K, maybe 40, maybe 46, like something where I was like, this is a scary amount of money. And I remember considering asking my current employer if they would mind paying for it, like if they would want to invest in it for me. But there was, I think, a voice in the back of my head that was like, I think if I take this, I'm going to want to leave this job. And so I was like, I'm going to invest in this myself. So I took that course. It just like opened my eyes to this new service. And keep in mind, this was 2016, 2017, when the only people who understood how to manage Facebook ads were like nerdy tech bros in their 40s. And here I was, this young 20-year-old girl. Actually, no, at this point I was 23. I was 23 and I had all this like social media organic experience. I understood the aesthetics of Instagram really well. Like I was just able to speak to a new market that wasn't really being reached. And I was able to then market that service. And I think that was like initially a huge differentiator for me. So I
Mhm.
put in my 2 weeks at work. I offered to manage their Facebook ads for them as a freelancer for a couple months, but then they fired me. I think it was like they were beefing against me that I was,
Uh,
going off and doing my own thing. But that's okay. And within my first year of freelancing, I was able to secure enough clients where I like ended up profiting or my like revenue was over six figures in a
oh
in a
my
year.
goodness.
I know it
From
was
42 to over six figures. That's
right. I
crazy.
like didn't know, and like not all that I was like necessarily taking home, right? Like that's my
Mhm.
high level what I was bringing in, but I was quickly, so I think I quit my job in October, and by April I was to the point where I was like, I need to either hire someone or raise my rates or like I was already swamped.
Mhm.
And so that's what I
Well,
did. I Go ahead.
yeah, let me before we go into you growing, I quickly want to ask because that's a huge jump from you to like being like, oh, I'm having some people reach out to me on the side to like, okay, this is making me over six figures. Were
Oh,
you still at this point getting the majority of your clients on these like uh freelance websites, or were you doing your own outreach too?
okay, I'm glad you asked that. I would say I was still maybe getting some projects and I was doing a better job of like being actively applying for available freelance gigs through those channels. But at this point, I was also investing a lot of time into like managing my own social media, just like personally, like my personal Instagram account. And I was able to get that account to 10K right around this time. And I also, okay, this was like 2017, 2018. I was writing a blog, and my most popular monthly blog in my freelance career was my end of month like income report recap. And do you know who Melissa Griffin is? I
No,
think she's
I
like
don't.
retired now. Okay, so I would like read her blog back then, and I just would always read her reports. She would do like income reports and detail like where she spent money and where she made money. And so I was like, I want to do this, but it was a little bit uncomfortable for me. So I just started by I would itemize my expenses for the month, and then I would just give the total of my income, but I just wouldn't clarify if it was like pre or post tax. Like I would just like I gave a number, but I was just afraid to be really
Yeah.
specific with it. And those blog posts I would then promote on my own social media, like blogs new out or blogs out, July's income report is up. Brought in so much traffic to my site. It gave me social proof because people would be like, wow, like 2 months ago, her income was at, she was getting 3,000 from these freelance clients and now she's at 8. Like it showed people like, wait, people are paying her to do this. I think she must be good at it. Like, and I didn't really realize that that's what it was doing at the time. But I think when you announce you were going, or like at least back then, when you announce you're going freelancer, I think people might have doubts or they're like, how are you making money? Like they don't know. And this was like how I chose to do that without really realizing it. And that helped me to like grow and expand my clientele. People would be like, people would send brands to me. They'd be like, I know you do this. They're looking for a social media. Like they'd introduce me because I was just top of mind because I was posting about it.
Okay, at first it was mostly from these sites, but then you kind of got to a point where most of your new clients were actually finding you based off of what you were sharing on social.
Exactly.
Okay. So I feel like that's the inflection point where people really want to be at.
Yes,
I'm
for
imagining that's like going over the hump to where at first you have to like work really hard to get the clients, but then once you start building the social proof, then things kind of switch around.
right. Then your website and your portfolio and everything
Yeah.
kind of like sells it for you.
Okay. And then my other question for you here is how did you I'm assuming at this point you're starting to have to raise your prices. Did you
Mhm.
have some like insecurities around like being like, wait, now you need to like charge more for this? Or kind of how was that journey for you and starting to adjust and raise your prices as you grew?
Totally. And I would say like you never, if this is something you like struggle with, it's something you will continue to struggle with. Like I remember kind of raising my prices for the first time, was super worried. It was definitely easier to raise prices only for incoming new clients first, right? Before like
Mhm.
raising prices on existing clients. So I did that to kind of like give myself a, a first step into it. But like I've had to do that like 3 times since even becoming our agency. Like I basically need to reevaluate our prices every year and raise them. And it takes a lot of like, you have to look inward and it takes a lot of self-worth
Yeah.
work. And I remember at this time I read the book You're a Badass at Making Money.
I love that
Like
book.
it's so good. And
Yes,
I
yes.
that like changed my perspective and was able to kind of help me get over the hump on how to raise my rates.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. So if you kind of want to, then I want to hear about kind of your transition from doing freelance, like as yourself, Becca, to
Okay.
then going in and then starting your own agency.
Got it. Okay. So, um, like I said, by April 2018, I was getting to the point where I was like swamped as just like being a solopreneur. Started, I actually like posted a internship. Like at this point, I had finally formed an LLC. I had a bank account for like a business bank account. And I posted that I was like looking for interns in exchange for school credit. And I had managed our internship program with the same format at my last job. So I like knew how to like get up the job listing, how to like get my company approved for hosting internships or whatever. Um, I think I hired maybe 3 my first semester, and I had no idea how to manage these girls. And keep in mind, I'm like 2 years older than them. So I was like super imposter syndrome. I was like, why would they listen to me? I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, I don't even know where I'm going with this. And um ultimately I got to a point where I was able to like bring one of them on part-time paid for like 10 hours a week. And then I was able to up it to 20 hours a week. And then I hired a second girl for 10 hours a week. So like I was able to get like up to a pretty good like I was thankful that I could incrementally work these girls up instead of having to like find someone fresh and start with like a full on salary, right? Like it was nice being able to work with girls who were in college who like had the flexibility to raise their hours they worked with me too. And then slowly but surely, I think I brought on one of them full time. And then we had in February of 2019, I officially rebranded to Homemade Social. And I believe at that time I had 2 full-time employees. And so we did like a full relaunch, like came out with our Instagram handle. I like, before everything was just under like my handle and like my personal blog. So it felt like really real. And that's how Homemade Social was born.
That's incredible. And how many employees do you guys have now?
Right now, I believe we have 8 and we have one more starting next week.
Oh my goodness, how exciting. So you guys have grown a
Yeah.
ton in the past couple of
I know.
years.
And we still do our internship program this semester or this summer. We've had 5. So it's just like crazy. And now I don't even like the other girls get to manage the interns and
Oh,
get to practice, like you know, managing subordinates, if you will.
yeah. That is absolutely incredible and also so difficult to do to be able to kind of transition from, I think, the freelance solopreneur to then actually, you know,
Yeah. Thank you.
changing.
That means a lot to me because I know that you talk to so many like well-credentialed women in the marketing space, but I recognize that I feel like if I applied those same methods today, it would be really hard. Like I think it'd be different. Like I'd have to be scrappy in different ways, you know?
But yes, it would still be hard, but it still was hard when you did it back then. Like, I feel like it's
Totally.
just a different hard as,
Yes, exactly. I guess what
yeah.
I'm saying is like I understand that like those systems and steps like cannot be repeated. Like I just like was luck of the draw and I was able to make it work.
Well, I always say luck and hard work. You have to have
Yes.
like a little
Yes.
bit of both. I think and I do think the fundamentals of what you did are replicable of starting out by going to there's like Fiverr, Upwork now. There's like so many places you can
Yeah,
go out, get experience, build your portfolio, pitch other people, build your brand until you have enough of a following or you have enough, momentum where people start finding you through word of mouth. Um,
right.
I think like the basics of what you maybe not like exactly, but I think the basics are massive. And then again, even of a harder thing to go from just a freelancer to I'm actually building a brand for myself. That's like a whole nother beast and a whole another thing that's so hard
Yeah.
to do that you were able to do successfully, which is incredible to see. I know there's like so many things that I'm sure went into you having success with your brand, but what do you feel like you do better than other agencies that has allowed you to have this success?
I think it really helped that I came in with a pretty like holistic digital marketing background. Like I at my previous roles, I took it upon myself. Like I would learn anything. Like if a client or my boss asked to figure something out, like I was more than happy to research it. Like I just love learning and I think that that's like an underrated skill, like just being able to like figure something out. Like even understanding, like I understood how like email automation campaigns were designed, and like these were all things I was like being exposed to at 23 as a marketing director when like I hardly had any of that experience. I just like was forced to figure it out. And so I think I went into being an entrepreneur knowing that like I'm just gonna have to figure it out. And I think why people choose to work with us though is one, I think they see that, but two, I've always put a really big emphasis on like company culture and work-life balance. I went through a huge burnout phase in 2020 just because of like more boundaries, which we can get to on that later, but I try and like we reduced our working hours from 40 hours a week as a team to 35 hours a week at the end of or at the beginning of 2023. And it was like the best decision ever. Like I
Oh my
think
gosh.
people appreciate that like we do that and we're just not here for the grind like other agencies.
What does the work week look like for 35 hours? Do they get to pick which hours they work, or is it like Friday's a short day, or how does that
Friday's a
work?
short day. So we
Okay.
tested it by doing in 2022, we did summer Fridays where like between Memorial Day and Labor Day, we were off at noon on Fridays. And then of course we all loved it. But we have it in our contract, like what office hours were available to our clients. So I was like, okay, if we're gonna make this change, I have to get it like in writing and rewrite all of our contracts. And I was really nervous, like kind of like it was to raise our rates like kind of similarly where you have to approach a client and be like, hey, we're going to reduce our working hours. But like most clients don't want to work or hear from us on Friday afternoons
Yeah.
anyways. So it worked out great.
Like most of us probably aren't working Friday afternoons, even if we're clocked in.
Yes. And I was able to keep my team pay, like the salary team pay the same. Like I was like, if you guys get the same amount of work done, like we will
Mhm.
keep pay the same. So it's great.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I know one of the other things that you kind of focus on for clients is the Gen Z millennial audience. Like that is kind of where your guys' niche is. What do you feel like is or what type of content, or what do you feel like just like doing really well in that space for that audience?
Yeah. Um, I would say that a lot of brands are going into marketing millennials and Gen Zs like too formally. Like we use the internet so differently than other generations, and Gen Z uses the internet so differently than millennials. And I usually like to say like fun, witty, and relatable are going to be the types of content that those generations want to see. And so I think a lot of like higher level older executives are kind of having to unlearn some, some marketing strategies that were like pushed upon them and how to speak to consumers because they don't want to be spoken to like a consumer. They want to be spoken to like a member of your community.
Yeah, I love that people are being too formal with Gen Z and millennial audiences. I think that's a great way to
Yeah.
put it. Um, okay, I noticed like even your guys's like brand and website is also super fun. You guys don't take
Mm.
yourself too seriously, and so that's cool that that kind of like even seeps into what your own like branding is.
Yeah, it helps us like attract the kind of client who respects that and like wants
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah. Okay, so now I kind of want to go into what you mentioned about boundaries. And so as you've like grown as, from freelance to, building your own brand, I also understand that there's so much work that goes into that. I have also struggled with boundaries myself building a business because there's just so much
Yeah.
you want to do all of the time. So I know that's something that's kind of like you mentioned before that you had put some work into or are more passionate about now. So do you have any advice to share
Yeah.
there?
So, I think especially in social media management and in freelancing, and I was, at the what's the term? I was at the forefront of the two. What's the word? I was where the two intersect.
Forefront, pinnacle, I
Forefront.
don't
Thank you.
know.
Yes. I think it's really easy to get sucked into like people pleasing tendencies as a service provider, especially in social media when it's on 24/7 and everyone thinks they understand it just as well as you do. And so in 2020, that was like a year that was actually really key for Homemade Social's growth. Like a lot of brands were moving their budget away from other marketing avenues and they were funneling it into social media initiatives. And so we saw like amazing growth that year. And with that, it was like the most stressful year of my life because I didn't really have any boundaries in place. Like clients were texting me
Mm.
on Thanksgiving Day about like
Oh
campaign
my
initiatives that
gosh.
needed to get changed for the Black Friday email that was already like approved and ready to go. Like all these little things. And so I just got to a point where I decided to meet with our lawyer and we put it into our contract like and we defined exactly what the client is responsible for and what we are responsible for, how we can be reached, how meetings can be scheduled, what like we charge like if you don't show to a meeting that we have on the schedule with a client, they get a free no-show, but every missed meeting within a 6-month period after that is $175. And we don't do that to like make more money. We do that so that like we can make the most of our time because then we blocked off 15 to 30 minutes that we were supposed to meet with you that we could have been working on something more productive, right? Um, Other things we've done is like defining like, okay, what are the client responsibilities? When do assets need to be due to us by? What are the ramifications if those deadlines are missed? Like there are just so many things that we like got into place to like set ourselves up for a more like healthy relationship with our clients. But I will say there also came like a part two to this learning curve. It wasn't just so simple as to be like, hey, sign the contract. Because it wasn't hard getting clients to agree to the new thing or the new terms. It was more so like once we ran into an issue where we're like, hey, per our agreement, just wanted to flag, like this deadline was missed. Now we're gonna have to do this at our hourly rate. They'd be like, can't you just do it just this once? Or like you then you have to
Mm.
learn how to communicate and like reinforce your own boundaries. So it's kind of like a 1-2. It's like setting your boundaries, and then I had to learn how to enforce them.
Okay. I love actually you mentioned that second part because I think that's honestly probably the hardest part, or like
It
when
is.
maybe the client misses and you charge them $175 and they're like, well, I'm so sorry. Like, can you waive it this one time? But you actually have to kind of stay firm and say, maybe
Right.
not or whatever.
Exactly.
What is your like, or what is your philosophy that you teach your team on like how to approach that when you have to be firm with the client?
Yes, so we invested in two things. One, Dot& and Co. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but they do like account management training, and they have a bunch of like documentation and courses on how to be like a better account manager. So we invested in that first, and then we also, sorry, I have like a hair stuck in my mouth. I'm like trying
You're
to get it
good.
out. Then we invested in, she's one of my friends. She owns a business called Career Civility, and she basically coaches and trains professionals on how to communicate via email. And so we came to her because we had all these specific examples where we were like, okay, we're struggling. Like, here's an email that a client sent, and we're like, how the heck do we reply to this? And like, not make them pissed at us, or, like we have 4 months left in this contract. We want to have like an amicable relationship. So we learned a ton from her, and I'd highly recommend like looking into hiring her for a training for your team if you need pointers.
Yeah, the other thing that I feel like that you learn also when you have your own business or when you are starting something new like this is that sometimes you can't, like, these are all things that you had to make the mistakes to know to fix.
Yes,
But I
exactly.
also think it's like you have to, yeah, you have to do it to like realize, okay, this is, you didn't know what to put in the contract until you learned, until like a situation happened. You're like, wait, actually, I need to adjust the contract this way. But I also think it's easy to not make those changes right away, to keep kind of like pushing them under the rug and being
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe we'll change this later, maybe we'll change this later, maybe we'll update the contracts, like, or being like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, versus being like, okay, no, actually, we need to change our systems and we need to change the way we do this
A
to
hundred percent.
prevent the problems. Because it's really hard at the beginning when you're enforcing that, but then later on, it makes things so much easier for you.
Yes, and one thing I want to speak to too that I think is like a character strength of mine is like I'm not afraid to ask for help. Like if I'm seeing an area that we have an opportunity to improve in our business and I do not have that skill set or the time to like invest in figuring out how to make it better, I will research like who can I hire to train us to do that.
Yeah, I think that's a really great skill to have, is to be open to getting help from others and being like, it's okay if I can't do all of it.
Thank you.
I love that. Okay, so we talked about breaking boundaries, which I'm really glad that we talked about. I think that's something, once you go into freelance or just doing your own work, that's probably the hardest thing that you have to balance,
Mhm.
and something that you have to learn. So I'm super glad we got to touch on that. Okay, I also want to touch on, so you mentioned that you have 8 employees now and your team is growing. A lot of the women that listen to this podcast are actively applying to like internships or entry-level roles. So can you touch on what you look for in, maybe people that are applying to your intern program or people that are applying to work, as a part
Yeah.
of your agency, and anything that you kind of like keep an eye out, or something that stands out for you for applicants?
Yes. Okay. So whenever we have a job listing, we always ask people to write into our like info@homemadesocial.com. And we'll always put like, make sure you put this in the subject line and address me as Becca Bunch or whatever. So like we're already like those are tests, to see if you can follow
Um,
directions and like do something the right way that we ask it to. So always be sure to follow the directions in the application. But next, we ask you to submit a portfolio, a cover letter, and a resume. The first thing I click on when I start going through applicants is the portfolio. Social media is such an aesthetic forward business that I want to see like that should be a reflection of like what you're capable of creating in the digital space. And so that's usually the first thing that I want to be impressed by. And in this day and age in social media, it's great to see like various graphic design capabilities, content creation capabilities for Reels or TikTok, copy, captions, like all that good stuff. Oh, and also like I'm in Canva all day, every day. So it's not like sometimes girls will apply in and every graphic in their portfolio is like a Canva template. And I'm like, I've seen this a million times before. Like it just doesn't impress me. But then after I go through the portfolio, I usually narrow it down by portfolio first, and then I start going through resumes. On resumes, I always look for numbers. So, like if you listed, hey, I was a marketing director at Homemade Social, I'd want to see like what results did you drive numerically? Like, were you able to increase engagement by X% in 6 months? Did you help contribute to a 5X increase in like client retention? Like, and how? Like numbers are key, or like numbers or statistics are key. And then lastly, I go through your cover letter. There, I'm really just looking for like, do you did you do your homework, and like, do you really want to work at Homemade Social, or do you just want to work anywhere? Because I think, and we're lucky enough, we get enough applications where like, I really want to work with the girls who want to work at Homemade Social, right? So
Yeah.
I always want to make sure that I'm like acknowledging their work first. Yeah. So I would say those.
Okay. I love, okay. I think the little like emails and job descriptions, it's
Mhm.
super easy to miss that, but that's a really good point because a lot of times people just like mass apply to jobs that actually
Yes.
they're
Yeah.
applying to. So I sometimes companies would put like a little like it's not anything like crazy. It's just like, oh, send us an email or do this or do like a quick little thing so we know that you intentionally applied to this
Yeah,
job.
exactly.
Portfolios too. Those are huge. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I am a huge proponent, especially I think in social media, it's almost like mandatory now to have a
Mhm.
portfolio. And I love that you mentioned the Canva, that you're in Canva all the time because I will notice the same thing if someone uses like a graphic or a template or
Yeah,
something that you just like see all the time in Canva. So make sure that you're also putting like your own
it's been, yeah.
spin on those as well. So in the, I know you mentioned like numbers. So in the portfolio, you want to see numbers. Is there like any mistakes you see that you make in portfolios or anything that stands out to you in portfolios?
Um, Usually on portfolios, that's also a great place to show maybe like a screenshot of like from the back end of Instagram analytics on how it posted. Um, but I can't really think of anything that would be like a total turn off. Like I'm really just looking for like what have you produced in the past, and is it good?
Okay. Is
Yeah.
there, and then the portfolios that you see, are they normally made in Canva, like on a website builder?
I've seen them all over. Like, I don't necessarily like. I understand girls are scrappy and like some are coming right out of college. I think the Canva websites are free now, right?
If
So,
you have a paid Canva account,
oh, okay.
I think you
So,
still have a paid
I
Canva.
noticed a lot of girls
Yeah.
recently are sending me to like a Canva link, but like even if you just attach like a deck that has been designed well, like that works great too.
Yeah. Okay. And then, yeah, and then you touched on the numbers piece, which I also think is super important as well. I feel like people, if you're listening now and you're in an internship, make sure you track your results because I feel like so many girls always forget to do that when they're
Oh,
in roles.
yes, I always like to mention that, like on the first day of any internship or role, especially in social media, like note how many followers that the account had on the day you started, or like what the engagement rate is. And then like you can make a note 6 months later to be like, okay, how much did I grow it? What strategies did I use, etc. But I would like to mention, if you are interested in learning more about like the boundary side of social media management and like all the boundaries I put into place in my phone, calendar, email, and in like our social media contract, we have a free webinar on it. It's on our website and it's called Becoming Unfuckwithable.
I love
You
that.
can find it.
Okay, I also want to ask you about this because I noticed on your website, Homemade Social also has resources and stuff like for
Oh,
like
yeah.
marketers and freelancers. So how did you also get into being like, because you're not only making like content for companies, you're also now making content and resources for freelancers or marketers. So how did you kind of enter that space?
Okay, so that just goes back to my roots. Like before we were even Homemade Social, I just I was, writing a blog. I had my own website, and I knew if I wanted to start an email list, I needed to give people something in return to join my email list. So I had a free like analytics
Ah.
tracking spreadsheet. It's still on our website today. It's just like new and improved. And it was just like my first freebie that I would give to get people on my email list. And then I would email my subscribers about my blog.
Oh my goodness. Okay. And then now it's expanding because I think you guys have quite a few courses on there.
Yes, exactly. So it's interesting because the majority of our audience is actually other like social media managers and marketers who just follow us for like
Mhm.
resources and tips. Like the majority of our audience isn't necessarily people who would hire us to do their social, but it ends up being great because like these social media managers work their way up and they're like, I know a company who we can outsource this to.
Yes, yes. I was gonna say
Yeah.
there's also probably like not thousands of people that are looking to hire that are gonna follow an
Exactly.
agency.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But
a
it's
lot of
still
times,
advantageous for us for sure.
yeah, so that's actually a really good angle to get an audience because a lot of times agencies don't have big followings because
Yeah. And
the
then that way
average,
our
yeah.
following can kind of serve as like a portfolio for our
Yeah,
work.
yeah. Okay, I love that. Okay, we've gone through so much, Becca. I feel like you're also doing so much, and it's been super cool to see how you've grown from at Target to
Yes.
then going into freelance, then going into starting your own brand. Um, what has been like throughout all of this? What do you feel like now looking back, you also just got married, so maybe you're like in, looking back on your life, looking back on your career.
Yeah.
What do you feel like has been the biggest accomplishment for yourself personally, or like any personal growth or anything that you feel like you've really learned that has really changed who you are
Mhm.
through this like journey of building your business?
Oh, that is such a good question. I think I've learned a lot about myself and being nicer to myself in being in like a leadership role and being able to like mentor women in their 20s. I'm 31, so I'm not far above them, but like, I was always the youngest sister, and so I never really got that opportunity. And I think being able to like mentor them and like give them opportunities to improve and give feedback has been like internally healing for me too, because I've been on the other side of it where you have a boss who gives you like the most unhelpful feedback or is like, hard to please. And so I feel like I just try and take that and give them I just really try and help them improve. And that helps me. It just like I've become a nicer, more accepting person because of it.
Yeah, I think I think, well, I think entrepreneurship itself also challenges you in so many different ways because you have to, it's just such a hard journey. And
Mm.
so I think that that's such a beautiful takeaway to kind of get from that is to kind of have a little bit more grace with
Yeah.
yourself.
A
And
lot of it is just like self-worth. Like
yes.
never even thought I would want to have a team at all. And like realizing you're worthy of a team, realizing you're worthy of a really good team, and that you're able to give them feedback so that they improve your life and theirs.
Yeah. And that just goes into like those beginning things of like pricing yourself of like, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, can I charge $18 an hour? Is that too much? Or you're starting with like little things like that. And then you kind of realize like kind of as you go through in your career that you are worth so much. Um and I think especially as women too, I feel like that a lot of that can be super intimidating, especially when it comes, that's why I kind of asked you about the money piece, because I know a lot of women struggle with that.
Yeah.
But I think it's such a journey. And if you are in beginning stages of freelancing or you are kind of starting, I think Becca's journey is super inspirational to look to of you don't have to have like all the connections in the world. You don't have to have all the money in the world to start out. If you're really passionate about it and you're willing to put in the work, then you absolutely can make that dream a reality.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie. I wish that Sky Society existed for me when I was in college and when I was like entering the marketing world. I feel like this is the exact resource that I would have wanted.
Well, thank you so much. And also, like as I mentioned with Homemade Social, they have a bunch of resources and stuff. So definitely check out their socials and their website because they've got a bunch of great stuff on there for freelancers, which I think, again, I'm glad we got to focus on that in this episode because I've had so many girls ask me about freelance tips. So
Hey.
I'm going to send them this episode from now on. I think
Great.
it's going to be super helpful.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. Have a great day.
Of course, Becca, thank you so much.